Maryland's offense could struggle without Isaiah Wright.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you guys all for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Maryland football could struggle after the huge injury to Isaiah Wright. And a lot of fans aren't going to realize how good Isaiah Wright was going to be coming into this year. And I think that the Maryland offense has a chance to really struggle without him in terms of the offensive line play, in terms of blocking overall. But Isaiah Wright, to give you guys some background, I think a lot of you guys know he's a transfer from Buffalo. He started almost every single game he played there. Really good player at Buffalo. An all-conference type of player over there at Buffalo. Definitely the type of guy that Maryland wanted. Just recently got him in the portal, and I thought it was the perfect land for Maryland to get a kid like Isaiah Wright because for a couple of different reasons. I think offensive line is definitely arguably probably our worst position group right now when you look at it and you say, what position group would you want to improve the most? I would have said offensive line, number one, or maybe quarterback possibly, but the quarterback room is a lot of unknown. And yeah, the offensive line is a lot of unknown too, but you feel like the quarterback room is more likely to maybe come together than maybe the offensive line. But he was a really good player at Buffalo, so I thought it was a really big deal that he ended up coming in because of how well he was played. It says he helped Buffalo tie for third in the MAC and with the fewest sacks allowed in 2023. Started all 13 games at left tackle for Buffalo during the 2022 season. And he's also an all academic guy because at Rutgers, he was at Rutgers before he was at Buffalo. So he started off in the Big Ten in familiar territory, but then transferred to Buffalo to be able to play. And he really broke out at Buffalo, was a really good player. And he came over to Maryland, and I thought it's the perfect fit here at Maryland. We need tackle help. We need offensive line help. We need I didn't think he was much of a depth piece as much as I thought he was a starter, going to be a starter, a top level, a good player in the Big Ten. I wasn't exactly sure how good he would be, but I thought he would be solid at least at the left tackle spot, which I thought was important after replacing Delmar Glaze, who went pretty early on in the NFL draft in the third round to the Raiders, which was pretty nice for Delmar Glaze, DJ Glaze, to go to the NFL, to go in the third round and have a chance to probably play pretty early at the Raiders. You don't take a offensive lineman in the third round if you don't have plans on him playing if not year 1, year 2, 3. So I hope Delmar Glaze gets that opportunity. But Delmar Glaze was an all Big Ten type of tackle, our best player along the offensive line for the last couple of years. And so we lost everybody up front. And this is what leads me to my really my point. Now that we're kind of done with the backstory, you guys understand more about Isaiah Wright, because some of you guys might not even know who he is. But basically, when I say that we lost him for the season, it was a lower leg injury, and it really could affect the offense. When I think about Maryland's football's offense and what I think that our offense could have been and what I think he could be on that line. And when I look at a guy that was a left tackle or potential starting left tackle, I was pretty positive that I thought he was going to start at left tackle. I felt pretty good about him starting at left tackle for the Terps. Sure, there were some other names like Alan Herron, who was also a transfer that came in, but I thought Allen would play more of the right tackle spot. And there were some other guys, Andre Roy, and some other guys that you could think, Kevin Kalonji, some other guys that I thought maybe could potentially play tackle for us. But I felt pretty good about Isaiah Wright starting. And so when I look at the Maryland offense, I say this is a huge loss. It's not like he's out a couple of weeks. It's not like he's out a month. It's not like he's going to come back. Like, he's out for the season with this lower leg injury. And I don't know exactly what the injury is. All I could read about, all I saw was that he's out for the season with a lower leg injury. And anytime you lose your left tackle, which is the most important spot on the offensive line, it is going to hurt your team a lot. It is going to hurt unless somebody can step in there and play high-level football, which is unlikely. It just is. With the nature of the offensive line, it's probably the hardest position, in my opinion, and a lot of people I think would agree. It's the hardest position to have depth on the offensive line that really works, that really can come in and play at the same level as the starter, maybe outside of like quarterback. I think it's probably the hardest position. There's might be a couple others, like maybe you could argue like a corner or something like that. But I think there's other positions where if you lose a starter or if you lose somebody that plays a lot, it might still end up being okay. Like maybe in the receiver room, you lose somebody, but you're still got a couple of younger guys down the road that are going to still be there, or in some of the other position groups. When you lose somebody, it might still be okay. But in terms of when I think about our offensive line, and probably already the weakest position group, along with being a position group with 5 new starters, it's hard. It's definitely going to affect the Maryland offense. I think Maryland's offense could struggle more than they probably more than expected early on. Maybe just getting used to this new offensive line. And I know Isaiah Wright was new as well to this offensive line, but I felt confident with how he's played at Buffalo that he was going to come in and play pretty high level football for the Terps. But now I look at it and I say, okay, he's gone. He was supposed to protect our blind side of a quarterback that's going to be a completely new guy, that's going to be the new Maryland quarterback who's supposed to take on after Talia and is supposed to be a good player in the Big Ten. And if we expect to win games, we're going to have to expect our quarterback play to be good. And when you start with how well your quarterback's playing, if your quarterback's not playing well, a lot of people are going to look to a couple of different things. A lot of people look to the receiver group. A lot of people will look to how's the run game going on. But if your offensive line is getting dominated, a lot of people will blame that. A lot of people will blame the offensive line for the quarterback play, whether it's right or wrong. A lot of the times it's right, and I think that could be a problem for Maryland football. So I think losing Isaiah Wright, losing the guy that's going to protect MJ Morris or Cameron Edge or Billy Edwards, whoever is going to be the new starter for Maryland football, who's ever going to, or losing Isaiah Wright on that quarterback blind side, I think is going to hurt the Maryland offense. I really do, especially with some of the really good rushers that we play this year. If we want to compete in a game like a Penn State, like a USC, like an Oregon, some of those teams have really good defensive linemen, guys that are going to go in the first round of the draft. And so I think losing Isaiah Wright definitely hurts the Maryland offense, and I hope it can still come together. I believe that it's honestly, I don't wish injury on anybody, and it sucks that he got hurt and that he's out for the year, especially just coming in, about to play Big Ten football. But the fact that it happened earlier in the season and as soon as fall camp started is probably for the best. You have time, the Maryland staff has time to adjust, has time to figure out what kind of approach they want to take, who's going to take the spot, rather than later on when we've got everything figured out and they've taken a ton of reps and then it goes down and then we're scrambling to figure things out. But I do think it's going to hurt us, especially with the new quarterback, the importance of the offensive line. And I'm just not sure about the level of play that we're going to get now from our left tackle, when I was rather confident about Isaiah Wright. I was probably more confident with him coming in than most everybody else. So it's definitely a question mark up front. We'll see how it goes. But I do think the Terps offense will potentially struggle without Isaiah Wright. Coach Gattis had some really big things to say about a Maryland receiver that I haven't really talked about a lot. I will talk about that after this ad from the Gametime app. Have you ever wanted to go to a game at the last minute, like a Maryland Terrapins game, but finding tickets is hard? I have been there before. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guaranteed, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of an event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account or redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Coach Gattis had praise for Shaky Knot, and it makes me think that Shaky Knot, the junior Maryland wide receiver, could be in for a huge season for the Terps. So you don't always see this where the coaches are really praising some of their guys, but it was clear that Coach Gattis, when asked about the Maryland receiver room, and he was talking about some guys in that room that can make an impact, he said that Shaky Knot is a guy that could surprise a lot of people, and a lot of people will know Shaky Knot's name after this season. It's a really interesting quote from Coach Gattis, because you don't always get complete intel. You don't know exactly what's happening in practice. I'm just not there every day. And a lot of the reporters, they're just not there every day. So you don't really get to know. You don't exactly have, honestly, you don't always have a huge grasp on the guys that are going to break out. And I've been talking about this third wide receiver spot but behind Caden Prather and Ty Felton, who both are guys that I like. Caden Prather on the outside. I think Ty Felton could play the slot. I think he can play outside. But I think those are your two more outside type of receivers. And you're looking at someone to replace Jayshon Jones inside in terms of the slot spot, in terms of that receiver spot. And we're looking for a third receiver. And there's a lot of guys. I love the depth in Maryland's receiver room. I think there's a ton of good players that can play at a pretty high level, but we're still trying to figure out who that third guy is. And it sounds like Shaky Knot has a chance to take it, and it's clear that he's been playing well, because Coach Gattis wouldn't just be talking about him like this if Knotts wasn't playing at a pretty high level. So it's pretty clear that Shaky Knot has been playing at a fairly, probably like elite level for him to say Knotts is a guy that I think a lot of people will know his name after this year, which I think is really interesting. And Maryland plays a good bit of receiver, so I think that having a guy like Shaky makes a lot of sense. But when I think of Shaky, the only thing that I'm like, I more think of him on the outside. I don't know how much I like him in the slot. He's a pretty big guy. I'd have to go back and really watch film and be like, yeah, he normally plays outside, or he normally plays inside, like whatever it is. But how I kind of see him as more of an outside guy, but different people can play at different spots. But he came into Maryland as a really high level recruit. If you guys remember, I'm looking back at his 247 page. He was ranked 144th ranked nationally. 4-star. He was ranked really high, third in the state of North Carolina. So he came into Maryland like supposed to be our next big receiver, next in line with the Diggs and the DJ Moores of the world. He was supposed to be the next Raheem Jarrett, like those types of guys. You're supposed to be in that category, and it doesn't always click day one. And I'm not saying it didn't. There's just a lot of guys in front of him over these last couple of years, and we've seen him play a little bit. We've seen Shaky Knot play in segments, but it sounds like he's going to be a guy this year that's going to break out. And I think that we need that on our offense. Another big-time weapon really would help, because we just talked about losing Isaiah Wright on the left tackle spot. At the tackle spot, that's definitely going to hurt our offense. And I think when you look at the offensive line struggles, to balance some of that out, you're probably going to need some pretty high level play from some of the position groups in terms of the skill positions. I mean, in terms of the receivers, I'm of course going to be looking at Ty and Caden, but everybody knows about them. I'm talking about somebody that not everyone's talking about, like Shaky Knot, who I think has really talented player. He's 6'2", about 190 pounds. He has a really nice frame. He's a good athlete. He's a guy that can go up and get it. And so when I think about Shaky Knot and I think about his future, we're looking for another guy in that receiver room that can be productive, that can get open, that can catch the ball. And I think Shaky Knot has that type of game, and I think he's going to make some plays this year based off what Coach Gattis said, but also the fact that there's just an open spot for somebody to step up. And so I do think he's an emerging star for Maryland football and a guy that we might not be talking about now a ton, but when the season starts after the first couple of games, we're going to be like, yeah, he's a real guy. He's a real option in the Maryland receiver room. And he's going to be probably next in line to be one of the really good starting receivers at Maryland. Caden Prather and Ty Felton are gone after next year, and you need to continue to turn out guys. It's next man up type of thing, and he's probably next up. Now, I do want to talk about Octavian Smith a tad bit because I've always kind of lined up Shaky and Octavian together because same class going into their junior years and all those different things, and two guys that you've seen hints and you've seen the talent. Honestly, Octavian Smith a little bit more than Shaky Knot. He's played a little bit more. And I always thought that Octavian Smith would probably be our third receiver this year. I'm not saying he's not. There doesn't have to be like a third guy. It can kind of be like there's a 3, 4, and 5 guy. It sounds like Ryan Manning's also in that conversation for a guy that's going to play a good bit. But Octavian Smith, I think he fits really well because he's a smaller guy, but he's like explosive. He works in that slot spot. He's probably one of the most explosive guys on our team. I think he can also return kicks. Braden was a guy that usually returned. Wissolowski is another guy in the receiver room that usually return punts. But I do like the talent in the back end of the receiver room, and I think there's plenty of depth in that room. And I think that's a young depth, but it's guys that I want to see. And when I'm talking about the first game against UConn, where it's a game where I'm going to be able to see different guys, I hope, I'm looking at how the receivers play outside of Caden and Ty, because not only for this year, but for next year, I'm always a guy that's thinking about the future. I'm always thinking about what's next. And so I'm curious how those guys play. And I think Shaky Knot has a chance to really break out this year, it sounds like, and really get his name out there. And I'm on that train too. I'm on the Shaky Knot's train. The talent you just would hope as a Maryland fan would just eventually come out. And I think it's going to start to come out. Maryland needs to land one of 2 recruits, or both would also be awesome. But I'll talk about that after this ad from eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships, and is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Maryland football recruiting has gone well, but I think to complete this 2025 class on the best of notes, I think Maryland has to land one of 2 players, and those 2 players are both on the offensive line, ironically, but I think they either need to land Javon McFadden or Jalen Gilchrist. And I talked about Jalen Gilchrist yesterday, and he's going to be a constant topic of conversation. Well, unless he just doesn't commit to Maryland this weekend, then we'll probably drop it and not really talk about it. much more. But Jalen Gilchrist, a top 100 player in the class, a top offensive lineman in the class, and a top player in the state of Virginia. And it's between us, Georgia, and South Carolina for Jalen Gilchrist. But this is a guy in Javon McFadden, now switching gears to Javon McFadden, is a guy that I haven't talked about, is a 4-star on Rivals, is on a 4-star on Rivals and on 3, which is interesting, but he's an inside offensive lineman. They have him listed on 3 as 6'3.5", 270, so plenty of room to grow into, but everywhere has him basically as a 4-star besides 247's got him as a 3-star, but on 3 has him as a pretty high-ranked 4-star player. And I'm looking at him and I'm saying he's definitely a guy we want to land. And I really want to land some of these guys up front. I just went on a rant about losing Isaiah Wright for the season and how it hurts the Maryland offense. I really want, and Coach Locksley did do some of this, but I really want Coach Locksley and the staff to really put their eggs in the basket of these 4-star offensive linemen that are highly coveted players from a lot of the country, but they're guys that we need. When I think about Maryland, we've been able to find good receivers that, yeah, we've brought in some high-level guys. We flipped Rakeem Jarrett from LSU when he was like a 4 or 5-star guy, and we've been able to recruit some high-level receivers, but we've been able to develop receivers. We've been able to develop running backs. We've been able to develop corners and linebackers. I feel pretty good about that. But in terms of the offensive line, a lot of that, yeah, you can develop guys, but there's a certain kind of level of talent and everything that there's just not a surplus of. In terms of the receivers, the skill positions, there's a lot of those types of guys. But in terms of the guys like Javon McFadden, an elite inside offensive lineman, so probably we're looking at a guard, possibly a center. When you look at a guy like that, you definitely want to land a kid like that. Same thing with Jalen Gilchrist, who's an offensive lineman, 4-star, ranked really high level, who we probably have a better shot at Jalen Gilchrist, but I really do think that Maryland's got to land one of these guys. Bryce Jenkins, who's already a 4-star, who's committed in our class, we don't know exactly what Bryce Jenkins is going to play yet, whether it's offensive or defensive line, but I might feel a lot better about Bryce Jenkins playing defensive line if we bring in either McFadden or we bring in Gilchrist. And neither one of them is predicted to go to Maryland, but they're both DMV guys. I guess you don't, like I said yesterday, I guess you don't really consider Jalen Gilchrist like the DMV, but he's still a Virginia kid. Where he goes is like Virginia Beach area, so that's not technically like the DMV, but still like local-ish guys. And McFadden is definitely a DMV guy. He goes to Riverdale Baptist, and it says his hometown's Washington, D.C. on 3, and it sounds like Ohio State is the favorite for McFadden, but Maryland's in the mix. And I was reminded because Malik Washington, again, I feel like it's always Malik Washington who's doing his job recruiting Maryland guys, talking to different guys. He said on Twitter, because everyone's posting their official offers today, which is always kind of interesting, because I guess the school has to write you like an official offer and whatnot. And McFadden posted the Maryland one on Twitter and said it was basically like always a dream of his to like play at the hometown to get an offer from Maryland, because he's a local kid. And Malik was like, then slide to Maryland. And I'm saying the same thing. Don't go to Ohio State. It might take you a while to get on the field at Ohio State. You can get on the field early at Maryland, especially a guy like McFadden, who's a really good player, but I don't know if he's elite in terms of what Ohio State brings in everywhere. Every year on the defense or offensive line. And so I'm saying a guy like McFadden, yeah, like you might be able to get on the field eventually for Ohio State, but you're going to get on the field really early for Maryland and make an impact and play early and play at home. And Jalen Gilchrist is predicted to go to South Carolina, but Maryland's very much in the mix. It's a similar type of thing with him too. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I think South Carolina with Jalen Gilchrist probably played pretty early at South Carolina, but still, he could play at Maryland early. He can play in the DMB, and I think that could really suit them. But I do think that Maryland needs to land one of the two of them for this 2025 class to feel complete, to feel as good as it possibly could be. And I think so far it's gone just about as well as it possibly could go, but you're bound to lose out on a couple guys. We lost out on Blake Woodby, but that was kind of expected. Jalen Gilchrist, I do think Maryland's very much in the mix. We'll see how it goes this weekend. I think he makes his decision on Saturday at 4. So we'll see overall how it goes. But that's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked On Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you for listening to Locked On Terps.